just do a quick introduction.
It really is, but
Yeah, we go through that too. We've got busy weekends. It's like
Still says 4:59.
on Sunday night.
there's a lot of information to know there.
It is 5 o'clock and we will bring our February 9th work session to order. We have one item on the agenda, and that is discussion of FY27 budget. And so we're going to turn it over to Chelsea to begin with.
Good evening, everyone. So just a reminder, the City Council held a budget work session back on January 28th. We had a 3-hour session where we talked about the entire budget. Collectively, after we were done with that meeting, there were a few outstanding items, such as the trunk sewer discussion and then the street repairs project that the council asked for additional information on. So for tonight's work session, we'd like to dive into those topics a little bit deeper. Travis Thornburg is going to start with the trunk sewer discussion, and then Mike Schulte is going to pick up and talk about the street repair project. So are there any other outstanding questions from the council before we get started? Okay, my intention tonight is to wrap up the budget after we've got some clear direction from the council, and we anticipate you having the full budget proposal within the next 1 to 2 weeks. Thank you.
Go ahead, Travis.
So my understanding is that there were some questions about the area that's being served by the North Trunk Sewer and then the impacts to private ownership related to the trunk sewer. Without having been part of that budget discussion, I kind of wanted to revisit that. So I guess first and foremost, as we kind of mentioned, there's approximately 7,500 acres within that north service area. And it's a mixture of uses. Primarily early, it'll be single-family residential, but I think there's significant opportunity as the north service area continues to grow to service non-residential uses or a mixture of home uses. And that's kind of why we recommended the North Trunk Sewer be the one that the council prioritized, because we feel that it opens up a significant amount of development land, and it also provides long-term growth opportunities if you can get past the most difficult portion of that sanitary trunk sewer service area, which is the very first property. So eliminating one variable that people have to work around in terms of when they're going to have sanitary sewer available is one of the reasons that we're suggesting that you prioritize this. Kind of backing up a little bit here, I think the easiest way to go about addressing some of these is, so I've got pulled up here, so back in November of 2023, this...
Travis, to clarify, from my standpoint, I agree with you. I think you made a good case for why the North Trunk Sewer is the priority amongst the other ones. The question that I had is more of, why do we need to do this now versus, next year or the year after? And so, to me, what do we think is actually, one, I think there was an appropriate question raised on the right-of-way access and talk through that. But then two, what imminent development would this spur were we would to do this action? So, am I jumping ahead, or am I if there were other questions? Those were my questions. Do others?
I think those were the outstanding questions. I think your focus here on, is this development drive happening in the next year? Should we be prioritizing this in this year's budget is, I guess, kind of a new question.
Yeah. So I think you're right around the bullseye. I just wanted to clarify a little bit.
Okay, so the short answer is the reason you should prioritize one of your sewers is you currently have nowhere to grow. With the utilities that are available as of right now, Polk City has no direction by which to grow in a significant manner. We've got the 450 single-family equivalents to service the Bergen Farms and Parable Ventures parcels. We've got approximately 60 to 70 acres of developable land along the existing Northside Drive sanitary sewer. And then we have a finite amount of development that could occur south of 415 once the southeast trunk sewer is built. But as of right now, you are at the end of your sanitary sewer infrastructure. There's a little bit
Minus those 450 undeveloped lots.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
so that's to say we've got no room to grow, is like after 450 lots are developed at a pace which, that's 6 years worth of current.
But corollary though, those are 450 single-family homes as opposed to any.
Yeah, so that's a fair point. That
Commercial
yeah.
development.
And I'm not saying like,
And it's,
put this off for 5 years, but that's
it is 450 single-family equivalents. So the area that is currently tagged to be serviced by those 450 single-family equivalents, approximately a third of it is commercial. And if a restaurant goes in there, a restaurant generates more than one single-family equivalent. So although the 450 seems like a lot, our estimates say that the entire Parable Ventures parcel cannot be developed on 450 single-family equivalents. And the other thing to bear in mind as well is, particularly in the development climate that we're in right now, the development timeline is approximately 18 months from when they have utilities. So every year that gets delayed, you're potentially adding an addition, you're talking extending it out to 28 to 30 months before anything can actually go or be built on. So I think that's the key aspect, is one of the reasons that we feel that a trunk sewer should be prioritized this year is, although you have a little bit of room to grow in various directions, once you run out of it, it's going to take a lot of work to gain momentum again.
I don't know if I agree with that, but I will say that in a 2-year time horizon, we should be considering that, or we need a 2-year lead time to get going on this. Where I would like to focus the conversation is what is potentially imminent. If we go ahead with this, where does that look? And I'm not asking people to predict the future. I know that's problematic. But on the other side, I also do want to set up what's potentially at play here, where $1.5 million for this, is that what it was, 1.4?
That's just what we have budgeted for fiscal year '27.
Okay.
The full trunk sewer is close to $4 million.
Right, but for this year is 1.4. So if we, did I say that wrong? 1.8. 1.8, thank you. At play, if we push off a development-oriented investment to the tune of $1.8 million, could be a tax decrease, which we've not done in a long time. So I don't want to position this as hey, it's an investment for tomorrow, today, even though it is that, but it's an investment for the residents of tomorrow by the residents today. So again, I'm not yet making that case because I've not yet made a decision, and I want to quit interrupting and let him go through with the proposal. But I do want to frame this up in a way that we could be looking at a decrease, which I think a lot of people are clamoring for, but we could also be educating on spending money now that will be paying dividends down the road is wise long-term. So
I want to add, you're not funding this project with property taxes. You're funding it with sewer revenue.
okay,
So this project would not provide a tax decrease for the residents, but you could not raise sewer rates as
Okay,
high. So
that's even better in my opinion, but thank you for clarifying that.
Follow-up question on that front. Would this loan be the type that we could backload the same way we've done a couple other recent loans where we slowly grow up the amount we pay as the loan gets further on in its lifetime.
I think we anticipate funding this project with SRF funding, and you have less flexibility with that funding than you do when you use general obligation. Can I ask you a question, Andrew? For like the water tower project, is our loan payment the same every year for 20 years?
So this would be a 30-year loan to spread it out a little further. And then half of it, $1 million of it would be TIF, and then $3 million would be first $400,000 is design and implementation.
So I do think there's less flexibility with an SRF loan. I think your payment is what your payment is each year.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So then I think the other thing that kind of came up too was the idea of impacts. So I think the easiest way to do this is going to be to look at the maps that were included in the trunk sewer. Just so I can zoom in and kind of show you what we're talking about here. So these are zoomed in image. It's actually the one big image, but I had clipped these as part of the presentation. But the section that we're talking about starts right here, and it runs up to Hug Drive, and it crosses under the street so that the manhole is directly north of Hug Drive and able to be extended upon. As you look at that, the routing that we've got shown corresponds to being in this heavily wooded area along Wolf Creek, generally located on the Tournament Club of Iowa. It then crosses onto this property here, which is owned by the Townhome Association, and then it crosses onto the Sharp property. When Chelsea and I were reviewing this, I think at minimum, we would be approaching 6 property owners regarding some sort of easement, whether that's a permanent sanitary sewer easement or a construction easement. Because I think just because of where the creek sits, the likelihood that we're able to construct this without acquiring easements from at least these three property owners is pretty slim. As you move further north, as part of the Creekview Estates Plat 1 subdivision, all of the lots that you show directly abutting the Sharp property have a 20-foot sanitary sewer easement that can be utilized and accessed upon notification according to our standard sanitary sewer easement forms. And so basically all that would take is a letter to the property owner saying, hey, we have this existing easement, here's the book and page it was recorded on, we're going to utilize that, here's the construction schedule. So I think the intent would be is that generally speaking, we try to minimize impacts. So we're going to go in low points, but then also kind of bear in mind, the more property owners that we have to approach, the more likely we are to become extremely delayed, incur additional costs. If for whatever reason we had to pursue condemnation or some other form of acquisition, each parcel that you acquire on carries a fixed fee for setting the dates, visiting the property, paying the juror, or not, the committee members for the condemnation hearing, all those kinds of things. So I think the range is probably in the ballpark of 6 to 20, but I'm going to guess pretty much every designer that would be part of this is going to lean towards that lower number and try and minimize the amount of parcel or the amount of property owners that are impacted by this. I think to kind of go back to the discussion before about how imminent is development, I think that's hard to tell, but what I can tell you is we've sat in enough pre-application meetings with developers that when you tell them you do not have a schedule for when they'll have sanitary sewer, the conversation pretty much is dead on arrival. So I think whether you budget for it this year, you budget for it next year, I think it's really, really important that you guys make a decision and provide staff with that schedule, because I think I'm using, metaphors and stuff, but it's a chicken and egg situation where if you don't have a plan for your sanitary sewer, there's not going to be a development. But if you're making your decision for when to put in sanitary sewer based on development, you're just going to end up in a vicious cycle where you sit and you spin. So I think whether or not it's in this budget year, next budget year, I think that's something to consider, is that if you don't, if council doesn't have a firm schedule on when they intend to build the trunk sewers, it's gonna really make it difficult for staff to give you an idea of when development can happen in this area.
That's fair. I mean, I think a simple but direct answer to that question is this is the highest priority trunk sewer we have and will be the next one put in, you know, and we're reactive to development. I don't know that that's, I don't know. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know of too many conversations that I'm aware of that have completely shut down on development that we've actually seen. I know there's developers that are wanting to push things. It's a very different conversation to retroactively look and say, you know, we didn't have this and we never would have gotten that had we not put a trunk sewer in, but.
Could you give us a good idea of when this trunk sewer could be in service if we started design at the beginning of the fiscal year? I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot, Travis, for a timeline, but I think that'd be helpful.
I think if you were aggressive and right-of-way negotiations went very well, you could start at the beginning of the 27 construction season. I think it's really gonna depend on how right-of-way negotiations go, and then some of the nuts and bolts pieces of the funding component. I'm not super familiar with that process, but if you're doing SRF loans, there's a whole process you have to follow. TIF, I'm sure there's a process you have to follow as well that's got a timeline on it. So I think as long as all the ducks are in a row, you get started, and frankly, if you would allow a consultant to start late May, early June, and then not bill you to July 1 to kind of carry over those fiscal year charges, I think every month that you give a consultant's going to be well worth it. And I think there is a chance that you start immediately in 2027, but I also think that starting sometime in 2027 is a pretty fair estimate.
Do you estimate it's a 1-year construction timeline? So would construction be through the full calendar year of 2027?
I think that would be your best case scenario. I think what it boils down to is, I don't know if anybody actually knows what's down there in terms of what they may run into, some of the topography down there, just because it's so heavily wooded. I'm not comfortable telling you it would be only a construction season, but I am confident saying it will be at least a construction season.
How wide of a area would they need to cut down?
It depends. So if we're able to run that creek line, you're talking 15 feet. As you work your way up, OSHA provides guidance that when you're trenching in a pipe, you go 3 foot above the pipe, and then you go to 1-to-1 slope on either side. So basically, for every foot of depth that you're gaining, you gain 2 feet of depth or width.
Okay.
So as you move further up the hill, your trench gets wider. There are ways, depending on the exact topography and the exact challenges, there are ways that you could write in contract provisions that require trench boxes, double trench boxes to narrow that footprint up. So I think that would be something that the designer would definitely dive into. Because ultimately, these regional trunk sewers, I think there's a lot of contractors out there that are pretty experienced with them. And so there's a pretty good appetite for work like this, particularly if you're running creek lines and you're running non-developed areas.
Okay. With this particular project, once it gets to Hug Drive, if you can back up the map just a little bit, how far north are you going?
You're going to a manhole would be set directly north of Hug Drive, and then it would terminate.
Okay.
Biggest obstacle is getting the 36-inch pipe there and then crossing the street.
Okay.
So we would need additional segment of trunk sewer to be able to serve the 126th branch line.
Yes, what I would say there is that would fall under the completely developer driven, let's work with the developer to have them install that.
So you outlined a couple different scenarios where we would either have to get, correct me if I'm wrong anyway, get approval from the homeowner versus we've already got this, here's where it's cited. If you go back down, I guess I didn't realize that 8 acres south of the Sharp property was owned by the, that one, yep, the townhome. What's the process with I mean, because that's presumably only there for aesthetic reasons as a buffer, even though it's buffering a golf course, but I mean, I guess the incentives are a little bit different for a townhome association to approve, trunk sewer, right-of-way access for something that doesn't service it. What's that process?
The process would be, so a lot of HOAs of that size have some sort of manager. I know when that was first established, it was Stanbro Realty that was doing the management. I don't know who's doing it now. I don't think Stanbro's doing it anymore. But basically, you would approach whether it's the board or the management staff, and then you would negotiate that, and then however their bylaws are written, that's how it gets approved. Whether it's the board has unanimous, or the ability to unilaterally approve that, do they have to have 60% of the ownership vote yes, all that kind of stuff. So I think because this is infrastructure, you do have the fallback of being able to utilize condemnation. Utility acquisition for that purpose is pretty well tested. So even if they're non-cooperative or they're difficult to get a hold of, difficult to negotiate with, work through, as long as you're making a good faith effort, that is an avenue by which you have.
Gotcha, thanks.
Will you go back to your previous map that you had with the color lines? Can you tell us what pink represents?
So pinks are those sewers that Nick referenced, where they're the branch sewers that go beyond the main trunk.
Okay.
These pink ones are different from what we're seeing on other drawings. I think that's part of the confusion here.
Okay. Yeah, and that's possible. I may have grabbed the wrong map, but so what you're seeing. So this is a more dialed in version where we concepted, and there actually should only be one, but we concepted being able to service via gravity the whole Parable Ventures parcel. So that's conceptually, the areas up here at the top of the map, those would be where Parable Ventures would get their additional services from, the additional capacity beyond that 450 single family equivalents. So really, this map probably shouldn't show these 3 lines because that's kind of beyond what we meant to do, but that was done as part of the neighborhood sketch process for Gateway Crossings. It was shown for information. So one of those would be installed based on actual development layout.
I feel like, from my perspective, and I appreciate where Rob's coming from as well, because it's part of being a steward of the money, right? I would hate to hamstring our developing, and I would hope, or I would direct staff, in my opinion, to get in touch with those that this would serve and be like, okay, we're approving this, we're gonna get started on this. What is your guys' plans for developing that as we do this? Based on, we're getting the trunk sewer out there, what are you guys gonna do when it's there, and here's where we think it's gonna be there? Let's work together on this and not just get it done and wait for them to, but what is their skin, if you will, be it their word or whatever the case may be, but that's just my opinion. We're looking at 3 years, possibly. If we kick that to next year, then we're, 30-30 or 20-30. Gets scary at that point. So I feel it's one of those things that hurts to do, but you have to do to continue the development. So that's my thoughts. I appreciate it.
Anything else? So what does he need from us then?
I think the consensus we received from the council at the work session was keep it in the budget. But there was some additional questions the council wanted to answer, and I thought this was a good time to do that. So my plan will be to keep the trunk sewer in the budget, knowing that the full project will not take place in fiscal year '27. It will bleed into '28. But right now it is in the budget for $1.8 million.
So for the record, I would like to see it pushed back a year or two pending developer feedback on their timeline. I kind of agree with Dave's point. Let's reach out to them and have an honest conversation, see, what's a realistic target date for some of those. If we see that that's inside of 30 months or the time frame that you used, open to revisit. And I don't know if we can get that done. I'm guessing probably not before the budget needs to be finalized, but,
But if we can keep this in the budget for now, start those talks saying, hey, we've got this budgeted for this coming year, start those dialogues. If they come back and say to us early in the process, we're not anywhere near that. We're not anywhere near that 2-3 year timeline that you guys are looking at, then we can reevaluate as long as we haven't actually started proper design work. How long then would any easements we negotiate be good for?
So any pipe easements would be permanent. The permanent easements would be sized so that you could go back and use them whenever. Temporary easements, you would just want to before, typically, you would compensate the property owner for 18 months. For an 18-month easement, I think it's 5 or 8% of the land value is the general guidance that we use. What I would mention to council is, and this happens fairly regularly, there are often times where we will take a plan set all the way to final design and put it on the shelf. So if that's the path you want to go down, that's a pretty low investment, because the fact of the matter is particularly on this project, there's not going to be anything happening in those areas. So your survey is still going to be good. Your tree clearing limits are going to be good. The only thing that may change is there may be one more tree that sprouts up, there may be one more tree that falls down. But generally speaking, the design work you're going to do is going to be good for 3 to 4 years. I mean, that's the end all be all. So it may be worth, that may be a negotiating chip of you tell a developer, well, we're ready to go when you are. If you just put the plans on, prepare the plans and put them on the shelf. So that's another strategy that we see a lot of municipal clients use, particularly over the last several years. There's been several projects where, federal aid gets delayed, the approval process gets a couple months behind, and the city's just like, we'll wait a year. Nothing that we've done so far is going to change all that much, so.
So Rob, does that put you at any more of ease, knowing that we've got the potential to shelf this if we don't get any kind of buy-in, or?
well, from the standpoint that if that's how we're gonna actually approach this and not, if it's in the budget, it's pseudo approved already, that piece of it, I would push back a little bit on why are we doing any amount, $1 or hundreds of thousands, what would the engineering rough estimate be on this?
I think we estimated at 12% of the construction costs, so I don't know what that number is.
Okay, so
400.
a lot of money to put on the shelf, it doesn't pass the smell test for me, but I do get that it's ready to go, and some of that, is messaging to the developer. But yeah, I mean, again, if we're truly gonna revisit it after the, feedback from the schedule of what they have, that does. The one thing I was gonna ask, so we have budgeted both sewer and increase to, sewer and water and sewer rates to increase 10 to 12% every year for the next however many years, mostly because of the water tower and WRA and some of those things. Is this inclusive of that, or would this increase be on top of the scheduled increases we already have?
Go ahead.
Currently, water is at 8%, I think it's scheduled, and sewer is 5.5. We do have a surplus in the sewer fund of, I think, 190 this year. Absorbing the trunk sewer cost.
Okay,
To carry on, we're gonna do hopefully a rate study in the next 12 months, and that, it might change.
okay. I think we can go back and look, that's great that if you're right, and you look at it more than I do, but I remember seeing higher increases, so, okay, that does help. So yes, to answer your question, Nick.
Okay, yep. If we don't have to spend the money because the developers aren't there, I'm with you, but I think getting this thing ready to go so that we can help drive it makes sense to me.
It is worth noting that that 12% includes construction administration as well as loan assistance as well, from like the application and exhibits fees. So not all of that would be due before it were bid too. So even that number gets a little bit smaller.
Okay, so where we are is moving this forward. You're okay with that in the budget this year? James?
It's a lot to take in there. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, but I do feel like we need to discuss a little bit further. I know I haven't talked a whole lot during this. My concern has been having the conversations on how high we are in residential compared to commercial, and then just looking at this potential land use map with the north side. The only place I see for commercial development is potentially on 126, and the rest of it is just 7,000 acres of low-density residential, potentially, which makes my mind go, does that get that weight to higher than 95% or a bigger problem than it already is? And that's why I was curious when I asked last time, is the only way to get sewer to this development at 126 by going this roundabout way to get
Just because of the topography, it is very, very difficult to service it any other way. I think there are places that we have a little bit of overlap that covers Parable Ventures, but it's pretty difficult.
But this diagonal pink that you have going towards,
That's the 450 single-family equivalent. So once it's at capacity, that doesn't get extended any further.
Isn't that section of Bergren property that's been annexed, isn't that commercial as well? Do you know what I'm talking about?
As well as the northwest corner of Sheldall and Hug. And I think that's a larger conversation as well. I think, in 2016, there wasn't a lot out here. So it may be worth revisiting that future land use plan, and we're actually working on something related to the regional park that we'll present to the P&Z hopefully in March, that may address some of your concerns, James.
okay.
So more commercial opportunities for,
Prioritizing on the characteristics of pretty much every sports complex you can think of in the metro, where there's explosions of convenience stores, restaurants, like sports-related things in the direct vicinity.
I was in Waukee over the weekend and at a sports facility, and I know exactly what you're talking about. Crazy. So what did you decide? Yes or no, or
I think it's worth keeping it in the budget for now.
Dave?
same page. Yeah, I want to make sure there's a commitment and that there is commercial opportunity along with this. James brings up a great point.
Okay. Anything to add?
No, look, as excited and as, happy as I would be if the phase one of our regional park to spur commercial development, I think that's a little bit optimistic because, you use the example of Waukee. I don't know how much bigger and how many more tournament-ready fields that has, but it's a significant number than the practice fields that we have, which are an important step, and I don't want to minimize any of that, but to think that because we're going to designate it as commercial on the land use changes the time horizon much. I don't know that that's true.
Okay. So I think we're moving forward on putting it in the budget. Good discussion.
Thank you.
What's,
One last thing on that, Chelsea, can we have like, I don't know, on the agenda for, I don't know if it's 3, 4, 5, 6 months, I don't know what timeline we need to be at, but just say, hey, where are we at with this, so we can, if the developers have said indeed that they're
Yeah,
committing to something, so maybe 6 months from now, you would have to tell me when that would, the right place would be, but to Rob's point, we want to make sure we keep this still going.
I'll provide you with an update. I anticipated putting together a request for proposals for design services in the next few months. That would have to come to the council to be approved, to be sent out. And then we would review proposals if the council is amenable to it, and we would award based off of those proposals. So I had anticipated in doing that probably March, April. But I can provide you with an update that we will have conversations with developers and get back to you on.
Thank you.
Yeah.
so it looks like we are moving on to a presentation on the street repair program.
All right. Okay, thank you. So again, we're going to tag team this between myself and Nick here. Nick has been the one in charge of going out with our crews and labeling and adjusting these numbers out in the field. So he has a lot to offer when we start talking about some of these repairs. I know that we're back here again tonight because we had a few questions about, some of the cost, how long, a 400,000 or 500,000 would take us to go ahead and get those repairs done. So tonight we're going to go through a few of those. We're going to go through how we get to those priorities, estimated values, and then we'll move on a little bit from there for some annual cost breakdowns. But so Nick, I'm going to let you go ahead and start with the priorities.
Okay. So each year we go out and we find these locations, whether we walk every street or citizens call it in, we go out and we rank them from 1 being the lowest to 5 being the highest. And we kind of all together bring these rankings, and it's basically how much traffic is on the street, the number of damaged panels, are there any storm sewer intakes, sanitary manholes? And then once we kind of have the idea of what the location looks like, what's the overall dollar amount? If it's kind of low, then it's a lower priority. If it's higher, then we bring it up because we want to try to get the higher ones out of the way faster. And that's kind of the criteria that we have, and then it changes some just depending on, a lot of times it depends on where it's at. And storm sewer is the one that we try to take those, put those in 5s because there's more problems than just a street failing. Usually, there's pipe or the intake, something else is going on. It's causing a bigger problem there. So we want to try to get those fixed. It's kind of 2 birds, 1 stone there. As far as overall, we currently right now have an estimated $4.4 million in street repairs. We kind of estimate that every year we add 150 to 200 to that list. Now, that's not just a bunch of new locations being put on. That was a question I was asked earlier of we really get that many more. It's not that we're getting more locations, it's some of the ones that have been there for a while, they're turning into bigger priorities. They're moving themselves up in the 3s and 4s, and that's where we, more money's needed to repair that. Currently, we budget between $200,000 and $250,000, and that includes engineering fees and stuff. So it's not just $200,000 going right to the street. Sometimes some years we have less, some years we have more, and we typically try to target the 4s and 5s because those are the worst ones. And then when we get kind of our estimate back and how much we can actually do, then we'll try to fill it in with 1s and 2s and 3s even. And then, so a couple years ago, we were approached we have some failing trails and sidewalks. And so we were kind of trying to figure out where we were going to put those. So Well, we already had a street repair program, so we'll throw it in with the trails. Right now, we have about $240,000 in needed repairs on the trails that we currently have. Also with that, we kind of talked about the sidewalk program the last meeting. And for our portion, we have about 20,000. Again, these are just estimated. If a contractor would come in and repair them for ourselves, it'd be about $20,000 in repairs. And then I also wanted to put in the ADA ramps. That was something that we started looking in that last year, especially with the sidewalk program being, maybe we're implementing it or not, but we also have ADA ramps that, they're in compliance right now, but if we do work around them, we have to bring them into today's standards. So right now they're fine, but if we repair around one, if we're doing an intersection or a sidewalk around it, if we touch it in any kind of manner, it has to be brought into today's standards. So if it was built in the 70s, it's still fine as long as it's obviously not broken. But as soon as we do anything around those locations, those have to be repaired too. And as you see, we do, those are 74 locations that are out of compliance right now, but they're still in compliance, if that makes sense. You know, we obviously have way more locations where there's ADA ramps, but those are right now, those are ones that are probably in need of repair when we're working around those areas.
Can I say something?
Yep.
So as you'll see, the sidewalks and the ADA ramps totally come out of what we were working for from last year. We were trying to find out how much problem we had out there with residential sidewalks. We had to do that inventory, and we wanted to do, then we started discussing the ADA ramps, and it's like, we need to know that number. So we have it, and we can update it now. We know the locations, we know the work that needs to be done. So just to let you know that those numbers come out of that inventory from last year that we did.
Quick technical question on those ramps, Mike. When a residential homeowner has a corner lot, are they responsible for the repairs on those ramps? Or is that to the city?
That's gonna be the city.
It's kind of one that it's one of those gray area ones where, I think in a perfect world, it would be the homeowner, but there's so much more compliance that goes with it that I think it would be smarter for us to be involved, because you have to hit certain percentages on not only the ramp, but the cross slopes that I just don't trust that we'd get that if a homeowner were to replace it at any point. So that's kind of where we've been at with it, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, I don't want to put us into spending $740,000 if we don't have to, but it's kind of one of those things. And then I think, okay, so our annual costs and breakdown, right now we're budgeting, like I said before, $200,000 to $250,000 a year. And if we stay on just that, it would take us 30 years to gain net zero. And that's basically taking in the additional, you know, every year that we're bringing in 150 to 200. And then kind of we're really only tackling about 50,000 of the old stuff. So it'd take us about 30 years to get to zero. Increasing the budget to 500,000 would take about 12 years to gain net zero. And then obviously you can keep going up and up, you know, shortening down your years. Right now, $150,000 to $200,000 adds about 5% to our list every year. And all of these costs right now are 2026 construction numbers. So obviously concrete's not going down, labor's not going down in price. So each year we go, it keeps increasing that as well.
Nick, I'll add one thing too. So what we see for pavement management, pavement repair programs across the state as well, is if you can front load budgets to take care of your highest priority, most damaged, worst performing pavements and sidewalks, you typically can then back off once you catch up. So the idea could potentially be as well that if you add budget in the first several years, you may be able to back it off as those ones and twos, you kind of get an idea for what their actual performance is as well. So that's something that we do across the state as far as pavement management is concerned, is if you really tackle those high priorities, sometimes you get the opposite of whatever the law of diminishing returns would be.
So if we found an extra magic $500,000 in the next couple of years' budgets, it might provide us with greater returns than
Yeah,
just.
it's less of a Band-Aid and more of like a suture with a splint kind of thing.
Sure, makes sense.
Okay, and that's all I have.
I agree with that approach. Could you, do we have anything in here? What is I know it was a 1 to 5 scale, like, are we talking 5 can be completely crumbling and 1 is a crack, or?
Typically, yeah, five is, there's not a lot there. You know, you still have concrete, but a lot of times it's what's underneath is not there anymore. And it's crumbling, and 1s are cracks where it can be, you know, we can go in and seal we'll cut the crack down and then fill it in with some tar and able to save that panel longer. You know, eventually it'll have to get replaced, but we're able to stretch those 1s a lot farther than we could.
Do we have I think it was the first slide, maybe the second slide, where that took 4.4 total? How does that break down in those 1 through 5 categories?
So I don't have that on here, but I do have the numbers. So right now, we have 8 priority 5s totaling $408,000. We have, and if you want, I'll keep going, or if you want to stop. We have 22 priority 4s at $678,000. And then we have 44 priority 3s at $1.1 million. We have 78 priority 2s at just over $1 million. And then we have 204 priority 1s at, again, just over $1 million. And trails, trails we have 3 priority 5s at $220,000, 2 priority 3s at $13,000, and 6 priority 1s at $2,200.
So maybe this is a dumb question, but let's say all of that $1 million worth of, let's say, the level 2.
Mm-hmm.
When that becomes a level 3, is that still $1 million? Okay.
No,
That's
yep.
what I figured.
Yep.
Okay. Both in terms of it grows and, okay.
Correct.
So is there a safe, because I think, you know, the struggle is that it is a priority to go from 5 to 1, but are you proactively spending some on these 3s, 2s, or 1s that will save you down the road?
We try to attack as many 5s and 4s as we can, and then we try to fill in, you know, if we have a budgeted amount of $200,000 and we can get, you know, 5 priority 5s for 170, so then we'll go back through and just try to pick up that extra 30 where we can to try to kick some of those 1s out of there. You know, it's hard to figure out what you
trust
want to
your
do.
judgment. I'm hearing you.
Yeah.
You got it covered.
And that's why the last several street repair projects you've seen, we've had bid alternates A through H
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah.
It's we're mixing and matching so that we have all variety of size, so that if we come in way low, we can hit a big one. If we come in a little bit low, we can add 2 small ones, that kind of stuff. So we're being very cognizant.
So again, this is where some of my pointed questions on the trunk sewer manifest, in the sense that we can spend money now that will save us money later, and spend that money on our current residents versus growth. Again, I'm not trying to revisit that conversation, but does the timeline of development match the need for some of this stuff? That's where, you know, it's a different funding source, and I get all that. It's not the same purse, so to speak, but, I don't know, this is just a much more eminently justifiable spend in the near term, in my opinion.
Okay, so we're past our hard stop, and this was informational, and we appreciate it. Good slides, and Chelsea's gonna send these out, you said?
You have the slides. I could send out the breakdown for you all so you have it. I saw you writing
great.
quickly, so we'll send that out.
And the numbers that I gave you too, I can put that in a little cleaner version and give that to Chelsea, so she can send it out with that too, so kind of give you a clear idea.
We are really trying to wrap up the budget. What we have in the budget right now for street repairs is $400,000. Are we still in agreement that is what should be in the proposed budget? Okay.
I think that's good. I think it's
Better.
worth revisiting over the course of this year, what we want to budget for '28, and if we want to play more catch-up, if we've got the breathing room.
Yeah, and those bid alternates, as you mentioned, are a good way to do that, so.
Okay, thank you.
You don't want to switch.
We are ready to have a motion and a second to adjourn our work session.
So moved.
And all in favor say aye.
Aye.
You opposed, same sign. We're adjourned until 6 o'clock.